All right, welcome back. Yes, we're keeping our focus on what's going on with the resumption of schools. Well, yes, we have heard the briefing yesterday by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. But this morning, we've got Detola Salau. She is a Senior Special Assistant on Education to the Lagos State Governor here in the studio. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning.
We also do have Yomi Otubela, who is the National President of NAPS. Good morning, Ms. Otubela. Thank you for joining us as well
Thanks for having me.
And then in Abuja, we also have Honorable Anyakan Omana, who is the Member House Committee on Media and Public Affairs, among so many other titles. Good morning, Ms. Omana. Thank you for joining us as well today. Okay, let's start from here. Let's start with you. Yes, a lot of concern about what is going to happen to schools when they do resume, when students get back to school. We know that some time ago we looked at some of those provisions, the requirements for students or schools to comply with the protocol before they resume. But what is the state doing now about the safety of students when they get back to school?
The COVID-19 pandemic has actually necessitated rethinking of education delivery. And this requires out-of-the-box ideas and also requires us to be inclusive and more engaging in how we go about learning, with technology as a sharp enabler of being able to create this delivery. That being said, what we've been doing in the state is, number one, a lot of the budget has gone towards what I had just mentioned, including technology as an enabler of how we're going to deliver education, and also redoing the protocols of how students come into school. We have on days and then off days. Off days, students utilize technology to be able to have learning. And this actually helps us to make sure that no learner is left behind. We also are working on improving learning outcomes by retraining our teachers. I'll be speaking a lot about that as we continue in this segment. Retraining our teachers to be able to utilize technology, both in the private and public sectors, so that they can be able to make sure that, once again, no child is left behind, because quality education for all our children is a must.
Okay, Mr. Tubela, I know that at that time too, the comparison between the public and the private schools, there were concerns about the students who had to come to school, go home, moving back and forth. Many were not too sure how all of that was going to play out. What kind of considerations are you giving, or is your association giving to that now?
Yes, in terms of the mode of resumption.
Yeah.
Okay. What we're doing in recent time is to engage the parents and all other stakeholders the more in ensuring that the students' safety come first. In means of trying to compare risk and benefit of returning the children to school, we have put so many things in place to balance lives and livelihoods. And one of those things is to set up committee that engage parents in what we call COVID-19 protocols officers, CAPCO. This team rotates daily to visit schools because their children are involved and they have more stake in this issue. And they rotate daily to see that not only that these COVID-19 non-pharmaceutical materials are in place, but they are sustainable and there is adherence. Aside that, there are also a team of officers within the associations who go around to advise and informed the populace within the stakeholders of the schools to ensure that there is total adherence to this non-pharmaceutical protocol. We also maintain social distancing by ensuring that we use alternative means of learning. And that is what we call virtual learning within our schools. Students learn, say, little hour in school, say about 3 to 4 hours in school, and later in the day, in the evening, they resort to learning virtually to support what they've missed in school. And this has been tremendous. It has not been normal. We are moving forward and there is no going back.
Madam, one of the concerns a good number of people have had, I'm sure you are aware of it, is that for the House of Representatives, for instance, why are we returning children to school now when, while the numbers were very low, less than 500 or thereabout, schools were shut down? But now the figures are very, very high, undulating around 1,500 confirmed cases daily, and where the schools have to resume.
Okay.
What was the...
I will address that. One thing I also needed to add is the fact that not only have we, in terms of creating safety protocols for our students, not only do we have off and on days, our school hours are actually shorter. Instead of going our normal 8 to 3, we've shortened our hours to 8 to 1. So there's less, how will I put it, school time, less time for interacting. It's really compact, straight to the point, and then school is over. So there's less interaction, less movement. You get what I mean? Okay, now to address the issue of why, when numbers were lower, I'm putting air quotes, versus now that numbers are higher. We need to understand that during that time, we actually had less testing compared to now. I believe we have more testing protocols now, so which means we have more reported cases. But beyond that, I also want us to look at education long term. I think a lot of us are looking at education short term. When you talk about education, you're talking about generations. And there was a report by an association that I belong to, an international association I belong to, where they were saying that in the US and in the UK, we have students who their education, their learning outcomes were shortened by 3 months due to the lockdown. 3 months, as an educator, 3 months is a huge amount of time in the child's mind. It's something that has domino effect later on. And that's 3 months for people who are sitting down and they have a lot of research, they've had a lot of data. We're also working on that data currently to see how far behind our students affected during this lockdown. If they're saying 3 months and we're behind before even the lockdown, I'm sure our own learning outcomes were also affected adversely by that.
So if that's the case, how come we're equally shortening their learning time from schools as well?
We're shortening their learning time because we need to also protect the caregivers. We need to protect the teachers themselves.
So who supervises how they interact amongst themselves in schools? Because you could go there in 1 hour and there could be damage.
We also make sure that there's social distancing in the schools, and we've been doing that. As you could see earlier, we have constant visitation of schools to check and supervise, and then we have other officials in the ministry who also go on site visits to ensure.
Let's hope that this will be sustainable, because someone was just saying just yesterday that, well, it's a good start, but maybe give us 2 weeks. But there was one information
Can I interject on that?
Okay.
We've not just been doing it just because of now that the media is watching. We've been doing this constantly.
Okay.
For the past 1 year since I've been in this position, we have constantly been going out on the field, making sure, in fact, after the lockdown, we went to interview students and their teachers because we did give out devices, and I was going to come to that next, as part of the enablers for technology. And we interviewed the students to ask them about the use of the technology, the devices.
We'll come to the technology bit in a bit, but the concern right now is COVID-19 and education at the same time. There was a school readiness template put out by the Federal Ministry of Education for the national level, the state level, and school level. For the state level, one of the things that was put out in that statement, item 2 in the readiness plan, and the sub 2H says, ensure parents submit the field COVID-19 testing consent form for all children. Is this part of the consideration that's been made?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
School readiness template for state level is from the Federal Ministry of Education, has the NCDC and the UNICEF supporting it. Under protection and well-being, item H says, ensure parents submit the field COVID-19 testing consent form for all children. Are you aware of this?
Yes, and this is something that we are working on with the schools, particularly our private schools, because of course the public schools, we are the ones who determine specifically what happens in them. But even the private schools, we do have templates, we do have a program on how the school administrators and the heads of schools will work with the teachers and work with the parents on making sure that each child is healthy before they come to school. And every child, we have also protocols put in place that every child as they're coming in, they are checked to make sure that their temperatures are checked and they are sanitized and they are wearing their masks.
The concern is not whether or not they have the temperature or not. You know, of course, about COVID-19. You don't change it, but that the form is like, okay, maybe the state government or the schools are going to test, but the parents need to consent that would happen. I think that's what this means. Is that the text? Is that the sense of what this provision says from the Federal Ministry of Education?
I would say that is something that we are working on behind the scenes.
But Mr. Tubela, what's the consideration for private schools on this one?
I must say here that it is a new normal, like I have said. Both Federal Ministry of Education, the UNICEF, WHO, we're still studying this virus, and the fact that they roll out guidelines, protocol, day in, day out, does not mean that some of them are still real and real to what is happening. There is a portion in the guideline from WHO that canvas for domesticating of protocols within the locality of the different states. Currently in private schools, what we do is that once a child shows signs of illness, we not only turn back that child, we ensure that we demand for COVID-19 test result before such child is returned to school. And I must say here that school alone is not the driver for COVID-19, and there is no zero risk in any of the part of the community. In as much as we open shops and we go there out, we still meet these children at home. And a good number of these children still go to the market. Some of them are now trading, hawking, and the best place that is most orderly in the community is still the school. It still remains the school, and that is why we have to return them back to school, not only to be educated about their academic scheme, but also to be enlightened on how to combat and curb the spread of COVID-19 within their community. And this is what we're doing in the private school at the moment.
All right. I would like to reiterate that school truly is the safest environment for our students. It is a place where we can contain, and we can also make sure that health standards and measures are being enforced.
Okay, we'll come back to this, but let's get to Abuja as well. Markwe?
Thank you, Chamberlain. Well, just yesterday, Mr. Honorable Omana, we had one of your colleagues on the program, Honorable Awaji Abiante, and he expressed concerns. I think he's on the Committee on Education, and he said, oh, we're not saying that students shouldn't or people shouldn't go back to school. What we're saying is that the minimum basic that should be put in place, especially in government schools, have not been put in place. So for instance, it says some communities have challenges with water, that even to get water in the schools for children to be able to wash their hands was going to be a challenge in some schools, and that nobody has been able to certify, especially in public schools, that this was going to be the situation. And so he had his reservations and was saying that perhaps we should give another 3 months before schools go back, schools resume. Well, that hasn't happened. But what are your thoughts on this conversation and this debate on the resumption of schools?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, the channel's team. First, let me say that this is in my opinion, and I'm speaking as a person, I think it's important that schools resume. And I want to commend the federal government and some of the state governments are keen in ensuring that children went back to school, irrespective of whatever opinion anyone holds. I think that a combination of ASU strike and the COVID-19 pandemic, in those two, we have lost a complete academic year for Nigerian children in school. And it's not as if the situation just turned around or it's just going down. No, we're seeing higher numbers because we're ramping up testing. And this is a new normal. We have to live with this until we get out of it. So we cannot shut down the future of a very important segment of the society because there is a problem that we ought to battle and fight like everyone is fighting in the world until we get the problem solved. Now listen, if you take a look at what is happening in the society, we have our markets open. Are people not going to market and buying food to come back and eat? Even in those places, we can't even find social distancing. We can't find people wearing face masks or keeping to the protocol, but they are buying food, including some of the people working in our various houses, going to those markets, buying food to come and cook for us to eat. And then we suddenly get so worried that our children should not go to school. I mean, I don't think it's that we should toe that line. Secondly, we have opened our airports and malls. We do all the social distancing in the approach, and then we get back into the capsule and sit together and get locked. And we stay there for hours flying to wherever we're going and coming back. And then children will not go to school, at least where you can, we even have an authority that can manage the distancing and manage whatever works. I think it's important we sustain the development of our children and sustain their future. Let me also add that the critical point you raised here, which my colleague Abiante talked about the readiness, I agree, like a typical Nigerian issue. There are several issues that borders on infrastructure, borders on preparedness. It's not just about schools. Even in our hospitals and some places, I know people who for one reason or the other felt unwell and called even the organizations, CDC and others. It took 2 days or 3 or not even getting response. So not to talk of schools. So we must continue to push and grow the monitoring mechanism to ensure that at least the best that should happen happens in our schools. Because if we don't do that, it becomes a problem in future. The social problems that arise from these things, I don't know if you have adult children around you in the house. They stay at home for 1 year doing nothing. They are growing some other thoughts in their brains. Look at what happens with the NSAS. Look at the level of people that got involved. These were children that were totally burnt out at home, frustrated. And somehow, with the opening of the system, they have ways of ventilating those social energies. They find ways of doing it. So let them ventilate it positively. And let us also, as administrators and managers of the system, put in place mechanisms that allow us to live with this new normal, but without jeopardizing the future of our children. Thirdly, I did raise a motion on the floor of the House on the need to urgently invest and grow virtual education, online education, and so on. And of course, I remember the Minister of State Education, Honorable Nwajuba, did say that government was doing everything to invest in that area as an emergency strategy. I'm not too sure that is what we are getting so far. I don't know what the outcomes are, because if we have that to a very reasonable percentage, we will reduce the level of interaction and have our children do a lot more of virtual studies and learning while also interacting at the level of classrooms to ensure that they are kept busy and they are kept positively engaged. I support the conversation that schools should be in session. I further support the conversation that rules should be put in place and monitoring should be increased and sustained to ensure that schools authorities keep to the protocols. I read the template put out by the Federal Ministry of Education and the NCDC in conjunction with UNICEF. It was very detailed. Any organization, without holding brief for them, but I read it from beginning to the end. And I think they did a good job in at least doing the thinking that will form a guide for our institutions to see what, at least understand what they need to do and follow up those things so that at least we can have a system that runs. Is this system not running? Are people not interacting? But we're keeping to the rules. That's what I think, Magba.
Indeed. However, you know, it cannot be one before the other. I mean, the system is running or should start running. However, some people are not keeping to the rules. In fact, some people have no wherewithal to keep to the rules. What do we do about this group of people without jeopardizing the health of those children and those who will be looking after them, say, from their homes? I think that's a bigger question. What's to be done in that regard?
I agree, Magwa. It's a collective responsibility. From home, for the students who are day students who go to school every day, the parents have a responsibility of talking to them and letting them understand the rules, what they need to do from that personal hygiene standpoint, from the face covering. It's just like if you have a driver who gets up and picks you and then he gets in he's not covering, he didn't prefer. You have a duty as a man in charge to ensure that that rule takes place first in your house. So we have the responsibility of parents and guidance at home. Then we have the duty of the school management authorities to ensure, because it's even a more structured environment than the public space. The school system is a very structured environment, particularly at the basic level, at the secondary level. Yes, maybe at the tertiary level, it may be a little more, it may be freer and looser, but at the basic level, it's tighter because the control system is stronger.
Well, where do you have the most concern, though?
The most concern for me is at the basic level. I am more concerned about that because those are people that you need to really think for. But at the other point, the other level of people understand what is going on. And they are knowledgeable enough, and they are educated to understand the implications of COVID-19. And they understand the need to do certain things. So there's no way, well, let me finish the other thought line, meaning that government has a bigger responsibility. That omnibus responsibility is that of government by providing the enablers, providing the education, providing the infrastructure, providing the drugs, providing all of the health support system that will help, and ensuring compliance. Ensuring compliance, that's the duty of government. And I'm happy I saw the initial report. Some of the schools, I think in Lagos, I quite appreciate what they're doing there, and in some states. In my state, Akwa Ibom, they're doing a lot of work in that direction. If you notice, in Akwa Ibom, schools even resumed before that 18th, because the government did say that we cannot keep our children locked forever. We must, if we open worship centers and people go to worship in their churches and in their mosques, so why are we locking the future of our children? And then we have people, they happily go to preach to a congregation that's not wearing masks, to a congregation of people praying and they are not covering and so on. The rules should come from even the church, from the mosque, from the church, from all of those centers where you have people conurbate in their numbers. So government also must keep to those rules. But coming back to the discussion of ensuring compliance, government needs to do that and do that big time. Resources must go into that. Energies must go into that. School inspectors must work the way they used to work when we were younger, in our earlier days in life, when you find school inspectors moving around, ensuring compliance of the educational system, doing what ought to be done. So we must engage more people, even on ad hoc basis, even if they are not direct civil servants or appointees. We should have education ambassadors or the COVID pandemic management ambassadors for educational system who can be hired on ad hoc basis to help the Federal Ministry of Education, State Ministry of Education, or various departments of education to ensure that at least we push our people to comply. I did see in some states where they set up task force to monitor worship centers to ensure that people at least keep to the distancing, they keep to the spacing, and they keep to the NCDC protocols in managing COVID-19. And those things did work. So the numbers, people get afraid of the numbers. And I see some sensational and worrisome stories about anxiety, people that I don't think that is the case. It's because, like the lady that spoke earlier did say, we're ramping up testing. And as long as we have more testing going on, we will have increased numbers.
Yeah,
you can imagine if we have testing in all schools.
We cannot dismiss, I don't know, how far, but we cannot dismiss this talk of a second wave, because it would seem that there's been a spike of some sort that we are currently witnessing, isn't that?
No, but there's no dismissing the second wave. In fact, I'm not even worried about second wave. For me, I think it's still the first wave. Because even it's still the wave that we knew, because if we had capacity to test, for instance, in every local government, in every ward, like you see elsewhere in the world, you have drive-through testing, you have in public places, in malls, in markets, and so on. We will be able to know those who are infected or those who have problems earlier than when they manifest, and be able to take care of them. So as we increase testing capabilities, we will continue to see these numbers. It's like if you increase testing for even malaria today, people are not walking into tests. If you increase, you will see the number of people who have malaria in this country on a daily basis. I'm just saying, for instance. So let us continue to grow testing. Let us continue to do what needs to be done. Keep to the protocols. Work with government from the family level, from the church, from the mosque, from every level, at the school level, to ensure that we keep ourselves safe.
It's a fine place to hold your thoughts, because we're going to have to take a break now. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation. Please stay with us. Well, Honorable Anikan Omana is still with us here in our Abuja studios. You know, I'm just looking at this paper, and I don't want to, dispute what any paper has on their front page, but you see this, parents reluctant to send wards back to school. If we're to look at the numbers that we have seen on the screen of the schools that have opened and the students who have been sent back to school by their parents, I mean, of course, their parents will have to consent for them to go back to school. Do you sense a reluctance on the part of parents, or do you think that parents think that it is relatively safe for their children to be in school, and that's why their children are back in school? What are your thoughts with regards to that?
I personally think as parents want their children to go back to school. That's my opinion, because I've had the opportunity of interacting with some parents and friends, and even before the resumption there was a lot of anxiety. Why are we still holding up these children at home? Particularly if you have young adults at home, you will understand what it means to hold down a child of 16 to 18 in the house doing nothing every day, from morning to night, week to week after week, months after months, and no opportunity for virtual education, no opportunity for online learning, and so on. So it's a problem.
Do you think our parents are just looking to throw their responsibility elsewhere rather than shoulder it and face it themselves?
No, it's beyond throwing their responsibility. It's a two-way thing. Maybe for those who have very young children and so on, and then who are also working, they will want to see an opportunity or situation where maybe safely they can also be able to do things that will ensure sustenance of that home. Because if they don't go to work and they don't earn and they make nothing, they will have no food at home and they will not be able to keep their families. It's a multifaceted thing. We are not in a system where you are getting unemployment benefits. We are not in a system where you are getting paychecks because you're off work and so on. And people live almost on a daily sustenance here in this country. People have to go to work, they have to earn. People in smaller private sector organizations will have to really work to earn. Whether if you don't work, you don't get a pay. So parents are also worried to that extent. So it's a multifaceted thing. So that's why all hands must be on deck at the family level, at the government level, at the school level, at the church level, at the mosque level, at the open space level. Every level, all hands must be on deck to keep the system safe. Let's keep to the rules and still carry on with this new normal. We cannot afford to totally close our systems or our homes because of the attendant implications, particularly in a difficult economy like ours. You can see what's going on. The economy is in trouble. The nation has no money. And we are still borrowing and to fund our budgets. And so if we are faced with a situation that is like a total shutdown and so on, the economy continues to dive downwards and so on. So what happens to people? So we need to approach these issues with an open mind and do the best we can do as a people, and government must live up to its expectations by investing in those things that will help the Nigerian people live happily and healthily.
Well, it's a fine place to leave it. Honorable Anikan Omana, we have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning and sharing your thoughts. He's a member of the House Committee on Media and Public Affairs. Once again, thank you. Thank you very much, Malcolm, and thank you, Chamberlain and the team in Lagos. Appreciate being here. It's back to you now, Chamberlain.
Well, thank you very much as well. Well, our concluding moments now. Well, Dr. Salau, the measures that Lagos State is putting in place, could you shed a little more light about that bit? Because I know that it was a challenge. Transportation, people will move around. Is that somewhat out of their hands?
Lagos State has been really proactive, particularly the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health, has been really proactive in ensuring that compliance is being met as the safety protocols we put in place for students and the teachers are being met. And like I said, we're constantly having COVID readiness visits to schools. And of course, checking the well-being of the teachers and the students. And then I also mentioned about the shortened hours for students. And we've made sure that these are both at the primary and secondary levels. I will also like to address technology as an enabler while we are having this discussion, because technology is something that a lot of people don't understand. What it really is, at its barest minimum, is a tool. And is a tool that you're supposed to use to make life better. So what we've been doing since 2020 is to utilize technology as a tool to effect education delivery. So what we did last year was we utilized TV and radio as remote learning for our students. And we did have drives where we gave out devices to our students. We gave them simple smartphones and we gave them radios. And that was thanks to contributions from the private sector. And this year we're going to be ramping that up because we have sections in the budget dedicated to ensuring that these devices are given to both students and teachers. And we also want to make sure that we also cross over into giving them in the private sector. Yes, it's free. Private schools. Yes, it is free. And we've also made sure that there's learning, engaging learning, adaptive learning on these devices. Yes, it is free.
Mr. Tubela, you spoke the other time about the inclusion of technology in learning, which is, of course, a good thing. But an issue a number of people might quickly raise is the difference between learning offline and teaching offline and teaching online. You know that there are different skill set for that one. Ramping that skill set up would be quite a challenge, wouldn't you say? Given that we also, instructors also tell us that it gets to a level in life when some adults are not able to learn anymore.
Yes, talking about using technology as an intervention to learning and as a supplementary way of learning. And that is where it starts and ends. It can only complement the physical learning. It can never replace it, especially at the basic education level, where children learn to learn the behavior, the acceptable behavior in the society, where they learn handwriting, where they learn how to speak, learn about public speaking. Technology can't teach this, can only supplement this. Yes, when we get to higher level of education, we can begin to see it as introducing technology to the level of about 80%, but definitely not at this level we are. Also, you could understand the side effect of the use of technology in learning. There are so much there on the site that we have not developed capacity, both at home level and at school level, to monitor the children virtually. Just a few days ago, our association, National Association of Parental Private Schools, sponsored a research among some young IT personnel on how to adapt different parental supervision or monitoring application that we can adapt to monitor these children virtually. There have been increase in the visits to pornography sites, the increase in bullying, and other wrong use of smartphones by children, all in the names of learning virtually. And these reports are local. These are things we can relate with quickly. And it's growing to an extent where it's even distracting the children from learning. And we are starting to use it for learning, but it's becoming a distraction. So until we develop more capacity, even at parent level, and I must add here that there is a need for parents to get more involved in this teaching and learning process.
I thought that there were the facilities in technology that can restrict visit to certain sites. I mean, isn't that something that could be done with the same technology that could be deployed in the learning process?
You should know that knowing is different from doing. there are a lot of things we have got to know that it can happen, it's happening, it's out there. Applicability of this issue is what we're talking about. Wearing of face mask is a knowledge that everybody knows. How many people apply this? Washing of hands regularly is a knowledge. How many people apply this? Similarly, in use of technology, you cannot determine how much people comply with using this. And even when you have this application that can control remotely, there are students that are also smart enough to know how to tamper with this application on their phone. And as I speak, I want to say that it is a good thing we have allowed the children to come back to school as we fight the physical health, we also to keep the mental health.
Okay. I know that you want to respond to that one as well, but let me take you up on that one. Something else, because we need to wrap up real soon. What are the gaps that this? Clearly, a number of people have said it. You probably agree as well that this pandemic has exposed some serious gaps in the education sector. It's nothing new. It's like we've been living with it, but now the gaps are so gaping that it's really making us very, very vulnerable. What are some of the gaps that the state government has identified, and what is being done to block them?
Okay. Yes, the gaps have been glaring for quite a while. Well, to those of us who are insiders and are very passionate about reform. And I like to say that in every chaotic situation, in any crisis, like the Chinese say, there's always opportunity. So I do see this as a blessing in disguise indirectly, not on the health side, but in terms of course, exposing the gaps as we described. So what we have done is, of course, we want to make quality education available for all. This has made everyone to see that this is something that we've not been able to address. So now we're talking about how do we address it. We need to make education inclusive for all. Now that we're utilizing technology, remote learning, I heard when I was doing a lot of briefing around this on social media, a lot of Insta Live and interviews by different people and people calling in, that when we were doing the radio and TV programming, we had people from across the country tuning in and utilizing it. We need to understand that a huge segment of our population, unfortunately, are out-of-school children. The radio programming means that they can listen to the radio anywhere it's being played, and the simplest, I call them really simple phones. You can actually listen to the radio on those ones, and they can also tune in. And the range for the range for radio is quite vast, so they can tune in. And I want to actually disagree that the human brain actually stops learning when you're an adult. You never stop learning until the day you die. Your mind is always acquiring and grasping at new skills. That is why it's really important to constantly push and address learning for our students continually. It should not stop. It's something that should continue learning. Lifelong learning is something that all of us should embrace. It's a new reality, particularly for our 21st century, that you're going to constantly learn. You can't say, well, I just learned this skill and that's it. You're constantly going to have to be building yourself.
We've got this, someone sent in this piece, says, good morning, it says, Lagos State government is trying, but there's still some lapses in public schools. In Surulere, particularly Ansarudin High School at Falulu, it's unfortunate that there are over 140 pupils in one class. How can there ever be social distancing?
Yes, let me address that. That definitely is a school that's not following our guidelines. Our guidelines are, in a classroom, there should be no more than 25 students, 30 the most. Every time we go into any of the schools and we do COVID readiness measures and we're discussing with them, we tell them JS1 will be maybe, I'm just giving an example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That way, and then let's say JS3 will also be that way. The off days, the other days, the other class will now be there, which means there are more spaces within the school, more classrooms, for us to spread out the class that will be around during the on day. If you have junior secondary schools are JS1, JS2, JS3. If you have on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, only JS1 coming in, and you are saying JS2 is going to be out, that means JSS2's classes are free. So that means you can spread out JS1 through JSS2's classes. You see where I'm going? If you can spread them out, let's say you have 140 students in JS1A. You can spread out JSS1A students into those classes where JSS2A, B, C, D, E were. So there is no excuse for why students should be contained in so few
Because
rooms.
I think the states may need to look into it. The person says, as of yesterday, there were 80 students in one class. But before yesterday, it used to be 30 people in the class.
It's something where
So they
we're
need to
going to
check
have to,
that
yeah,
out.
we're going to have to go and visit and check out what's going on there,
Yeah.
because that's something we've been very strict about. When we started this program, I mentioned it off and on days. We're very, very hard on that. And we constantly come down hard on them on
All
that.
right. One more thing, Mr. Tubela. How are the private schools coping with paying the teachers at this point in time?
We better leave that to God and the private school to sort out.
Will the teachers accept that, leave their salary to God?
I leave that to God in the sense that we have taken our destiny in our hands, and with the help of God. Government has promised so many palliatives, and that has not been coming. There is this survivor fund that federal government in particular introduced, and we are told that for 3 months, teachers in private school will be paid, even though maximum of 10 per school will be chosen, even where we have 80, 100 teachers in a given school. Among these that are chosen is just about 2% from our data from all private schools that are available in the country. For those who actually register online for this program, the number that were chosen were less than 20% of those who actually apply. And as I speak with you, not even all the 10 that were chosen in all schools are getting this survival fund. And it's just a 30,000 naira per month for 3 months in some cases, and the highest you could get is 50,000 naira per month in some cases. And there have been a lot of complaining in our secretariat of schools who had gotten the first month but didn't get the second month.
All right.
There are some who have not even gotten at all. And I said the data is quite discouraging, that the only way out is for us to begin to ask God to show us direction.
Okay, as quick as you can, Dr. Why are they not paying?
I can address the fact that I mentioned inclusive education, and one of our things that we're really driven about for the budget is inclusive and making sure the quality education is addressed to all. A part of our budget line is also working with our private schools in this area, because we know it's really hard. And one thing that I have to say about Lagos State is we all know that a lot of our students in Lagos State are in these private schools. So we do know that we do need to support the private sector, because a lot of our students are there and we need to work with them. We need to work with them. So the thing is, how do we make sure that the public sector supports the private sector? And that's something that we're really, really working hard on. As a part, a dedicated part of our budget concerned with that. And we do need the private sector to come on board and engage with us more, to tell us about these concerns and to provide us this data that he's mentioning, because that will really help to drive the interventions that we want to create for them.
So we're hoping that, that social distance handshake will happen such that things can be sorted out. But we do thank you for coming on, Dr. Adetola Salau, Senior Special Assistant on Education to the Lagos State Governor. And then we also have had Yomi Otubala, National President of the National Association of Proprietors of Private Schools. I got that one right. Thank you for coming on as well, and we wish you all the best.